What's good, Newbark? I hope everyone has their lightsabers drawn and their high grounds taken, because today we're going to be talking about some Star Wars. Jedi Fallen Order is a story-driven action-adventure game that got released in late 2019 by Respawn for the PlayStation 4, Xbox, and PC. Before we go any further, let me say that all specifics I discuss about the game and all footage shown on screen will be from the first hour or so of gameplay to minimize the potential for spoilers. Anyway, for those of you that have already heard some of the things about this game, to quote Han Solo from Episode 7, it's true. All of it. This game is microtransaction and multiplayer free, with the only extra cost content that's even available being a deluxe edition that offers a few in-game cosmetics and some videos on how the game was made. To be honest, I'm not really sure the board members at EA understood what Respawn's team was even pitching to them when they said the words single player, Unreal Engine, and surprise mechanic free, but all of that is aside the point right now. As gamers, we care about the final product, and I have to say that we are looking at something that is truly wonderful with this game.
Come take a look at this.
Let's get started by discussing the story. We follow the adventures of Cal Kestis, a Padawan left without his master after the events of Order 66, who has been trying to hide and survive amongst some scrappers before one day he is put in a position where in order to save his friend, he must once more call upon his connection to the Force. As we all know, the Empire's typically not too fond of this, and after saving his friend, Cal is quickly set as the next target for the Imperial Inquisitors, or Jedi Hunters if you will. Cal manages to narrowly escape the scrapping planet with the aid of his scrapper friend and a few new faces we learn some more about later. This propels him on a journey to rediscover his connection with the Force and find his own way to act as a source of hope in a world of darkness. Along the way, for those more familiar with the Star Wars franchise, there are many familiar locations and characters that all make sense within the already existing Star Wars lore. But in order to avoid spoiling the story for anyone, I won't go into any further details about these. Even off my brief and vague synopsis, many of you can probably already tell that this game isn't necessarily doing anything very groundbreaking in terms of its plot, and generally speaking in my experience with the game, I was able to predict the majority of what was going to happen in terms of the plot beats without too much trouble, although I feel many of these same points also carry over to some of the most highly regarded story-driven games in the industry, such as Uncharted. This is because games like Uncharted make a fantastic use of likable, relatable, and most importantly, believable characters, which is something that I believe Fallen Order also does well with. Between the gradual reveal of each of the main characters' backstories, learning to understand their mistakes, and some motion capture I would argue is on par with the work of Naughty Dog and other greats in the industry, we are given a cast I couldn't help but find myself attached to and genuinely concerned for as I progress through the game. I wouldn't say this is done as well as Uncharted, but keep in mind the development of Uncharted's characters and bond I felt with them also took place across many games, whereas this was a single adventure. Aside from the characters, the other aspect of this game that really helps to drive the story home is the sound design. Every lightsaber whoosh, blaster shot, starship engine, and string bowed throughout sounds like it would fit right in with the best of John Williams' scores from the movie soundtracks, which, as I'm sure many of you know, is no easy feat. I have played this game both on PC with speakers and headphones, as well as on Xbox X with a 5.1 surround sound system, and all three experiences were an absolute audio delight. When the great sound work is paired with Respawn's visual stylings, we are given a very complete sense of atmosphere and strong sense of immersion throughout the game. Speaking of visuals, this game overall looks very nice and pleasing to the eye, with a distinct coloring, detail, and sense of art direction to every place you visit that feels both inviting to explore and, of course, true to the world of Star Wars. Every place you visit and creature you meet feels like something that could have just as easily fit in anywhere in one of the original trilogy movies without ever failing to present at least a few new ideas. For a closer analysis of how the visuals are handled, be sure to check out Digital Foundry's video on the game, as they provide a better analysis on how the look of the game is achieved than I could ever hope to.
Checking out the disturbance.
With all of our aesthetics out of the way, let's dive into how the game plays a bit, where I'm going to say I think this game mixes a lot of great ideas from games that already exist to present something with its own identity. First, let's return to the Uncharted franchise, with its large, often semi-explorable action set pieces and dynamic settings, even if they aren't always the most interactive. This game borrows some of the best elements from both of those, with massive settings and layers often shown in the backgrounds of where you are exploring, such as the Star Destroyers present on the game's first planet. These add a sense of scale and drama to the situation that makes everything feel more awe-inspiring and adventurous, for lack of a better word. Adding to this are the many dynamic scenes peppered throughout the game with smooth transitions between gameplay and cutscenes, where the camera will do a quick pan from its focal point during the cutscene back to being behind Cal and you're right back in control again, often without any kinds of hitches. This makes the cutscenes in game feel far more coherent and like they are all part of the same piece of art, rather than being their own separate pieces of the same story. This is something I feel Uncharted often aimed for it, but at least in my experience with the first 3 Uncharted games, I would say Fallen Order does a better overall job with. That being said, both games' sense of action and environmental scale are still very similar in many regards, and given how the game's first real combat sequence takes place on a train, not horribly unlike one of Uncharted's own iconic sequences, I would say it's fair to assume Respawn's developers were inspired by the popular franchise with great overall results. Moving on to the combat and traversal of the game, I see 2 clear inspirations here, the first being the Tomb Raider reboots. These games placed great emphasis on exploration of semi-open areas to find new tools, weapons, upgrades, and ways of tackling the same problem, with the combat emphasis leaving a lot of creativity to the player. Similar to this, Fallen Order encourages exploration to find a variety of cosmetics, additional lore elements, and piecemealed upgrades for things such as your health, that can only be found by exploring areas beyond those simply required for the story of the game. Both in Fallen Order and the Tomb Raider games, I genuinely love these approaches to exploration, as it makes exploring the world around you a rewarding experience that you can do as much or as little as you want to without impacting the main story in any groundbreaking way. Part of what makes this Metroidvania type of formula work so well in these games is the variety of puzzles that you face in both that call upon you to use any number of your tools, or in the case of Fallen Order, force powers. Both games also utilize a diverse traversal system that often combines a variety of things from climbing, jumping, sprinting, and shifting objects in the environment. All of this makes the exploration not feel overly tedious, and more importantly keeps things fresh as the puzzles evolve through the new skills you develop along the way. This brings us to the combat of the game, where I feel it borrows many elements from both the Tomb Raider games and, of all things, Souls-like games. Much like Tomb Raider and the arsenal of weapons you accumulate, Fallen Order over time presents a variety of force powers, with each being able to help in any situation in a variety of ways, thus always giving the player options to deal with combat. That being said, the overall rhythm and melee-based nature of the games feels more in line with the Souls-like games, with great emphasis on memorizing enemy attack patterns, deliberate timing of blocks and dodging, and, of course, precise management of Cal's stamina bar. And don't forget a difficulty level that proved challenging. For reference, I was playing on the second highest difficulty and died plenty of times throughout, though I'm also not the greatest at these types of games to begin with. That being said, also much like a good Souls-like, the challenge always felt present for the right reasons. Whether that be that I attempted to parry at the wrong time and watched my stamina deplete, or I kept attacking too long after staggering an enemy. Every time I felt I could learn from my mistakes, which I think is why combat systems like this feel so rewarding, and Fallen Order is no exception. Sure, I may have wanted to scream a few times in frustration, but this was always followed by a great sense of accomplishment once I overcame the challenge at hand. As another note on the gameplay of Fallen Order, Respawn presents players with a great variety of customization options for Cal's clothing, your ship, your companion droid, and my personal favorite, your lightsaber. This is where those cosmetics I discussed before come into play, since most of the cosmetic options are discovered by exploring areas of the planets you visit that the story doesn't usually require. While the other customizations are nice, I want to put some special emphasis on the amount of effort Respawn put into the amount of options available on the lightsaber. You actually get to choose each piece of the saber you would like equipped. This means you can use a variety of emitters, colors, switches, sleeves, and materials that your hilt is made out of, basically in any combination you can think of using the parts you've unlocked. This is the first Star Wars game I remember playing that offers players so much personalization in their lightsaber, which really goes a long way in adding to the experience. Why? Well, one of the great milestones in becoming a Jedi within Star Wars lore is supposed to be the construction of your lightsaber, and this customization system I think does a good job emulating that.
Don't worry, I'll find my own way out.
The gameplay is basically great, but this wouldn't be an honest review if I didn't mention a few technical hiccups in both versions of the game. I should preface this by saying I started the game on PC, then proceeded to play through it on Xbox X, and restarted it on PC before writing this review, so that may impact a few of my issues and comparisons. For reference, my PC has an RTX 2080 Super GPU, a Ryzen 3900X CPU, and the game was running at 1440p with maxed out settings while installed on an M.2 SSD. First, in a game where timing of blocks and dodges is so critical to the combat, there were times where I will admit the input latency of the Xbox X felt slower than I would have liked, making the game at times feel ever so slightly unresponsive. That being said, I do feel this taught me to anticipate enemy attacks a bit more in the game in order to compensate, as when I returned to the PC version with much lower input latency afterwards, I noticed everything felt much easier, though that could also be that I just got better at the game since I'd then already beaten it on the Xbox. I should also note, I noticed the delay less and less as I played through the game, so it could have mostly just been a residual effect of having started with the PC version. The other major flaw I noticed in both versions of the game was an issue of loading of some kind. Sometimes in the game, if I was sprinting through an area very quickly, or had just jumped out of a cutscene, or even was in the middle of a particularly graphically intensive cutscene, I would notice the game would experience some performance issues. On the Xbox X, during gameplay, this would either manifest as a significant frame rate drop for a few seconds, or in a few extreme instances, the game freezing entirely with a loading circle appearing in the bottom right-hand corner, before then resuming a few seconds later as normal. For gameplay on PC, I did occasionally experience significant drops from a frame rate hovering between 80 and 90 under normal circumstance, to somewhere between 40 and 50 for a few brief intervals, and never experienced the complete freezing to load I saw sometimes on the X. In terms of cutscenes, I found the PC version to generally be okay, minus some similar frame rate drops to the gameplay, whereas the X for certain cutscenes showed severe stutter on the video, where it would cut out very small chunks of the scene while the stuttering occurred and the audio continued, before a few seconds later everything would sync back up. I should also note that in one instance, my gameplay completely crashed on the X, which is something I've experienced with no other games I've played on my console. All that being said, despite these performance hiccups, I didn't find any of them had a significant impact on my overall enjoyment of the game, as they were mostly pretty isolated. If you're interested in more specifics as to these technical issues, I will once again point you to the Digital Foundry video on Fallen Order, where they discuss some similar problems.
You were talking in your sleep.
So, all in all, is Fallen Order the Star Wars game that fans have been waiting for? Honestly, I think so. Between the excellent combat, wonderful environments and sound, and acceptable story, Fallen Order is not only a great Star Wars game, but just a great game in general, minus those few technical hiccups. Anyway, that's all for today, so thank all of you for watching, and be sure to let me know all of your thoughts on this and any other Star Wars games you've played in the comments section down below. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.